There's a theory that I see in every comment section about the housing market across the internet. It goes like this: BlackRock and Vanguard are buying all the homes, and they are going to flood the market to intentionally crash it so that Wall Street can profit while regular homeowners are left with nothing. Now, this theory doesn't make any sense, and I'm going to prove it with data that I see every day as Redfin's chief economist. Because here's the thing: even if Wall Street wanted to intentionally crash the market, they wouldn't be able to. And I'm going to show you with housing market data why that is impossible. Like every conspiracy theory, there is some truth to the housing market being out of whack right now. Demand has collapsed to near pandemic lows. Pending home sales are down 4% year over year as of this spring. That's the largest decline in over a year. Home touring activity is also really weak. Normally, touring activity picks up in the spring, 40% above what it was at the start of the year. But this spring, touring activity is only up 11%. And the imbalance between the number of sellers and the number of buyers is the worst that we've seen since the Great Recession. There are 630,000 more home sellers on the market than there are buyers right now. That's a 46% gap, the largest that we've seen since Redfin began tracking this data in 2013. And that means that buyers have the negotiating power in 38 out of 49 metros across the United States. In Miami, there are 148% more home sellers than there are buyers. In Nashville, it's 119%, and in Austin, it's 112%. These are markets where buyers have all the power and sellers just have to accept whatever prices buyers are willing to offer. Sellers are responding by cutting their prices. 34% of sellers in February reduced their asking price. In Austin and Tampa, it's over half of sellers that are having to cut their prices. And the reason why this is happening has to do with mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are at 6.3% right now. They were a bit lower earlier in the year before the conflict in Iran started, but now that gas prices are going up and inflation is a huge worry for the Federal Reserve, mortgage rates have gone up and made home buying more expensive. And when home buying gets more expensive, buyers back away, and that creates this imbalance where there are more home sellers than there are people wanting to buy those homes. Normally, when you have this many more sellers than there are buyers, prices do come down. The last time this happened, prices crashed during the foreclosure crisis. But there is a good reason why prices are not going down this time around. It's because home sellers have better options than accepting lower prices. They have what economists call a high reservation price. Most homeowners were able to refinance into record low mortgage rates during the pandemic, back when a 30-year fixed rate mortgage was only 3%. Remember, I said it's 6.3% now? That means that homeowners have really low monthly payments. And at the same time, they are sitting on plenty of equity. According to the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, home values are 50% higher than they were during the pandemic. That means that anybody who bought a home before or during the pandemic has plenty of equity. They are house rich. So if they don't want to sell their home, they don't have to. This means that homeowners are in a very secure position. Their mortgage debt is way below the value of their homes, and they have low monthly mortgage payments. Even if they run into an issue like they lose their job or they get out of control credit card debt, they can still refinance and get that equity out of their home to solve their money problems. They don't have to sell if they don't want to. There is a narrow group of sellers who is in more trouble. The people who bought at the peak of the market in 2022 in markets that were booming. Think Austin or Miami or basically anywhere in Florida or Texas. If you bought in 2022, your home might be worth less than when you bought it. And if you've run into other financial problems like credit card debt or job loss, you may be at risk of foreclosure. And this is why foreclosures have increased, but they've increased from nearly rock bottom levels. This is not the foreclosure crisis, but it is a trend that's worth paying attention to. So the market definitely has problems. It has symptoms of being sick, but it's not dying. There's a difference between having problems and being in a crash. Especially when homeowners are so secure, a crash is highly unlikely. So let's dig in a bit more into just how secure sellers really are. 80% of homeowners with mortgages right now have interest rates below today's market rate. And many are locked into mortgage rates below 4 or even below 3%. And selling would mean surrendering that rate. A homeowner with a $400,000 home at a 3% mortgage rate pays about $1,700 per month. If they sell and they buy a comparable home, say for $450,000 at a 6.3% mortgage rate, they are now paying $2,800. That's $1,100 per month just to move into a house that's basically the same value as the one you currently live in. This is why, when home sellers are thinking about cutting their prices, many of them are choosing to delist their homes entirely. The math just doesn't work out to sell your home for less and then pay more for your next home in higher interest. So, this mortgage rate lock in effect means that sellers are just about as sensitive to interest rates as buyers are. Even though mortgage rates increased at their fastest pace on record back in 2022, home sellers were affected nearly as much as home buyers, just in a different way. Home buyers backed off the market because it directly got more expensive for them to purchase their homes. But home owners backed off the market because it became more appealing for them to stay in their homes and not move instead of give up their record low mortgage rates and take on a higher mortgage rate when they go to buy again. You can see these consequences directly in the data. New listings are down 1.4% since last year. Active listings are down 2.7%. That's the largest drop since 2023. In a period of record seller and buyer imbalance, supply is contracting. And this trend has been going on since late 2022. We've had nearly 4 years of potential home sellers deciding to stay put rather than accept lower prices. Homeowners are choosing to remodel their homes into their dream home instead of moving into that dream home. According to a Redfin survey, 65% of recent home renovators explicitly chose upgrading over moving. 71% planning renovations said they're improving their current home rather than buying elsewhere. And it's mostly Gen Z and millennials who are going with this trend. Many young homeowners who rushed into the market during the pandemic had to settle for homes that weren't exactly perfect. And now they're choosing to remodel their homes instead of upgrade from their starter home into their forever home. So, this phenomenon of homeowners having record low mortgage rates, not being willing to give them up, has a name. It's called golden handcuffs. And these golden handcuffs mean that even though affordability has gotten worse for buyers and buyers are less willing to pay high prices, prices aren't coming down. Whenever mortgage rates go up, you have a group of homeowners who are even less willing to sell. And this restriction of both demand and supply at the same time is what is keeping home prices and home values so high. The very homeowners who might be in the most precarious economic situation are actually the least likely to sell because they can't afford to give up their cheap mortgages. These golden handcuffs explain why there will not be a housing market crash. In order for prices to come down, we need more supply. And you can see this in different pockets of the country. The parts of the country that built the most homes during the pandemic, like in Austin and in Florida, are the places where prices have come down the most. That new construction is sensitive to prices. Those builders want to move those homes as quickly as possible, and they don't have any golden handcuffs holding them back. But the parts of the country where there was very little or no new construction at all, like the West Coast, the Northeast, and the Midwest, that's where prices are still holding up. In fact, prices are accelerating in the Midwest. So even though the housing market is not going to crash, it's just impossible for it to crash because of how much equity homeowners have and how secure they are with their record low mortgage payments. The housing market is still in a very concerning place, and we should be paying attention. First-time homebuyers cannot afford to break into the market at these high prices. But existing homeowners are pretty much set. They're doing great. And this has created a stratification in the economy. For example, empty nest baby boomers own 28% of the nation's large homes. You have older adults with no children in the home occupying three-bedroom homes. There's nobody in those bedrooms. It's a misallocation of housing resources. Meanwhile, millennial families with children own just 16% of the nation's large homes. And it's those baby boomer homeowners who are the least likely to have to move. 58% of baby boomer homeowners own their homes outright. They have no mortgage rate at all. It's not that they're paying 3% interest, they're paying no interest to stay in their homes. And these baby boomer homeowners are pressuring their political leaders to keep their housing costs at these record low levels. They're revolting against property tax increases. They're pressuring their leaders to subsidize their home insurance costs. These baby boomer homeowners want to have low housing costs forever. Meanwhile, millennial and Gen Z first-time homebuyers keep having to pay higher and higher prices at higher mortgage rates with higher insurance costs and higher property taxes. This has created generational wealth inequity. Americans aged 70 plus and older now hold 26% of the nation's $48 trillion in real estate wealth. That's up from 17% 2 decades ago. Middle-aged adults in that 55 to 69-year-old age range own 35% of the nation's housing wealth. Meanwhile, Americans under the age of 40 hold just 12.6% of the nation's housing wealth, which has been flat for nearly a decade. The wealth is not circulating in this country. It's staying stuck in houses owned by older Americans. Now, part of the problem goes back to housing supply. I don't want to make baby boomers the only villain of this story. So the places that built very few homes during the pandemic, they did that because of their regulations. The places that built fewer homes tended to have single-family zoning and strict processes around permitting that slowed down construction and meant that homes weren't getting built even though there was extreme demand for those homes. Places in the South, like Texas and Florida, tend to have looser regulations and restrictions on building homes. So they got to have that construction boom during the pandemic, and now prices have come back down, and first-time homebuyers can still access those markets. But on the coast and in the Northeast, zoning is very much regulated. You can really only build single-family homes, and there isn't enough land to build single-family homes near the places that people most want to live. So with that supply restricted, all you have are existing homes that existing homeowners have no reason to sell. And let me get back to that Wall Street myth. I addressed this in a previous video, but it's worth saying that big Wall Street investors own a very small fraction of existing homes. Investors who own 1,000 or more homes make up less than 1% of homeowners. It's actually small investors who own 1 to 9 homes who make up the biggest share of investor-owned properties. And those small investors are not doing any kind of coordinated attack on the housing market. If anything, they want home values to go up. They want rents to go up so they make more profit. And maybe you can fault them for blocking new housing from being developed because new housing is the only real chance we have at bringing down home prices. But they're not part of some conspiracy. That conspiracy is a complete myth. So when you boil it down, there are 2 reasons why home prices are not going to crash anytime soon. One is that homeowners have plenty of equity in their homes. Home values have increased 50% since the pandemic, and many of those homeowners have owned their homes for decades. Remember how it's the older Americans who own the most housing wealth? The other reason why the market isn't going to crash is because of those record low mortgage rates that homeowners enjoy. So when mortgage rates go up, yes, it decreases demand for housing, but it also decreases the number of homes that are on the market. And when both demand and supply go down, prices can stay elevated even when it doesn't seem to make much sense. Even though home prices are not going to crash, home affordability is going to improve. And that's a silver lining that home buyers should pay attention to. Home prices are up 1% from last year. And although that is an increase, once you adjust for the 3% inflation the economy has been going through, home prices are down in real inflation adjusted terms. And I think this trend is going to continue for the next 5 or even 10 years. Home prices are going to go up slower than overall prices, they're going to go up slower than wages. And that gap is going to make home values more affordable to first time buyers. So even though home sellers aren't willing to sell for less than what they paid, they are going to start accepting lower price increases than what they were used to back in the 2010s. And although it's a very slow moving phenomenon, this is going to be a benefit to first time home buyers for the next decade. And before I conclude, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is all of this stagflation from rising gas prices, caused in part by the conflict in Iran and also caused by the trade war. So, this stagflation is bad for the economy. It increases prices at the same time that it weakens the labor market, which makes us all worse off. But in this type of environment, housing remains a pretty attractive asset. Home values are stable. They're not increasing the way they used to, but if you buy a home, at least you know that you have a roof over your head, a place to stay, and your value is somewhat insulated from all of the chaos of the economy. And if the stagflation turns into a recession, which is definitely a possibility, that would actually improve housing affordability. The Fed would have to cut rates in order to stimulate the economy, and those lower mortgage rates mean lower mortgage payments for buyers, and that brings more buyers to the market. It's the same thing that we saw during the pandemic recession and what we saw during the 2001 tech recession. When recessions start outside of the housing market actually tends to be pretty resilient. Home values can actually increase during a recession. So, what should you do as a home buyer in response to all of this information? Well, my advice is to stop focusing so much on whether the housing market is going to crash or not. It's not going to, or even what's happening with oil prices and mortgage rates. Just focus on your own personal situation. Can you afford to buy a home right now? Is that home one you would want to stay in for at least 5 years? Because that's about the mark where you start making more money off of owning a home versus renting a home. If owning a home is part of your long term strategy, your long term goals, then buying now is a perfectly reasonable choice. You'll be able to buy at a moment where buyers have negotiating power and you won't have to compete in really fierce bidding wars like you would have had to during the pandemic. But if you need to wait so you can accumulate more savings, so you have more for a down payment, so you can avoid paying so much in interest, that's a valid choice too. Home prices aren't going to increase very much between now and next year or even 2 years from now. There isn't some secret strategy where you can game the housing market right now, but that means there's less pressure. You can just move at your own pace and make decisions according to your own life goals. I'm Daryl Fairweather, Redfin's chief economist and also author. If you liked this video, please show it, give me a like, comment, subscribe, and stick around for the next video.